Welcome back to the Humble Market Timer YouTube channel. Once again, if you enjoyed the content, please like, comment, and subscribe. In today's video, I want to give you a price target for Solana. Now, typically, you have a lot of analysts and people on the internet. They're always giving you price targets for different stocks and commodities and crypto coins, but they never give you any true justification as to why they are projecting that particular price point to be the price target. And in this video, I want to differentiate from that and give you exactly why I believe the price target for Solana will reach what I think it will reach, and it will be based on the history of crypto as well as the technicals in the chart. Before I go any further, here's my disclaimer. Once again, these are my sole ideas, not investment advice. Now, when you're looking at crypto and price target projections in the history of crypto, you first really have to look at Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the big dog of all crypto. It has the largest body of work as far as number of years where it's been relevant. So to really figure out the history of crypto and how things have traded over the years, you really need to look at Bitcoin first. So we're going to do that. Here's a chart of Bitcoin. And what you will find in looking at Bitcoin is that Bitcoin has always made its market tops in post-halving years at the end of the year. So the last 3 halving years were 2016, 2020, and 2024. And based on that, all the peaks occurred at the end of the post-halving year, which would be 2027, 2021, and we're currently in 2025. So based on history, we should see the peak of this particular bull run at the end of 2025, which is the post-halving year, if things go as they have always gone in crypto. And although things have changed a bit as far as the landscape of crypto, really the way things are lining up, there hasn't been that much of a differentiation between what happened in 2017, 2021, and I think what will occur in 2025. Let's first go back and look at 2017 of Bitcoin. Here you can see we're in 2017 here. This is a weekly chart. Every time in post-halving years in September, we always get a dip in crypto. There's always a decent sized drop in crypto. And lo and behold, in September, what did we have again? We had a decent sized drop in September in crypto. And what has always happened is after you have that decent sized drop in September, you always start to get an uptick in October, and we tend to either peak in November or December, or maybe at the very start of January of the following year. But that has always been the case, and I'm going to show you how that's taking place in the chart. You can see here back in September, you see all these red candles in 2027 September. That was where we bottomed. That happened to be at about $2,600. And from September of 2017 to the start, or actually to about the December of 2017, we went from about that 2,600 level all the way to about 19,000. So we had a run of about 660% based on this measurement tool from September of 2027 to December of 2027 in Bitcoin. Let's look at the next halving year of Bitcoin. That was in 2021. Once again, what did we have? We had a dip here in September. Right here, we had a dip in September, and then we moved from that dip in September, where the price dipped to about 39,000, and it went all the way to about 69,000 by the end of November. So we had that dip in September, and then we made approximately 75% move from the bottom of the dip in September to the peak in November. And once we hit that top in November, we then began to slide in Bitcoin. Just to see what has taken place recently. As you see here, what did we do? We had another dip in September, just like we have in these post-halving years. And now we're trying to reach that next level. And the key, typically, as I've said, we tend to have that dip in September, and we tend to peak in November or December. That has been the case in Bitcoin every time we have had these post-halving years. That's been a trend, and lo and behold, Bitcoin, since we had that dip in September, Bitcoin has been charging, and we recently, I believe as of yesterday, made a new all-time high in Bitcoin. So things are lining up just like they have lined up in the past. Let's just kind of take a quick look at Ethereum. You can see here in Ethereum, which was a lot less developed than Bitcoin, so the history isn't quite as large. But looking back in 2017, again, we had a dip in September all the way down. Here's that September dip in this area, all the way down to about a little less than $200, around $200 a share. And we went from that $200 all the way to about $1,400 by the end of December. So just from September to December, we made a move approximately 600% back in Ethereum, all the way back in 2017. Ethereum all the way from about $200 to almost $1,400 in about 3 months time frame. So again, that key time, September to the end of the year, post-halving years, it's always been critical. Ethereum, once again, going back to 2021, again, as we saw that dip in September, right about here, and then that dip, it dipped to about 2,600, and we popped all the way to almost 5,000. So again, that's about an 85% move, 95% move. So again, always having that dip in September, and then the big push in to the end of the year in that post-halving years. Now let's look at Solana. Solana also had that big dip back in September of 2021, right about in here, and it moved from there all the way to up here. Again, in that very short time frame, the price moved from about $120 all the way to about $260. So again, another big move in that same time frame. Now let's look at the chart and let's look at the technicals. Now I drew this parallel, and this is, in my opinion, a very key parallel because the midpoint of the parallel has been the trigger in what makes the price go from the bottom of the parallel to the top of the parallel. As you can see here, we hit the midpoint here, we consolidate on the midpoint, and eventually went up, came back, it acted as support, and we went back to the top of the parallel. came back down to the midpoint line, consolidated a bit, went back to the top of the parallel, then we smashed through the midpoint line and went to the bottom of the parallel. We double bottom the parallel here, and you can see we have been making a move off that second bottom of the parallel. So the key point and the key trigger in what will make Solana go to what I believe will be its next high will be the break of this midpoint line with confirmation. Once we break that midpoint line, I believe we will go all the way to the top of this parallel once again. Now, looking at the top of the parallel, if you consider the fact that we tend to have that dip in September, which we had once again, and that we tend to make those tops at the end of the post-halving year, you can see if we look at that November to December time frame at the top of this parallel, that gets you into about the $380 price range, and I will range it from 380 to about 420. I think that'll be a decent range that you can look to possibly see be the top of Solana in this last push at the end of the cycle, which tends to happen at the end of post-halving years. And again, that lines up with the top of this key parallel. Again, that 380 to the 420-ish price range. That is your price target that you should be looking for. That's not been pulled out of the sky. That is based on what has happened historically and what the technicals are pointing to. So be on the lookout for Solana to get to that 380 to 420 range sometime in either November or December. Hope you like the content. If you like it, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.